You're listening to the Jōrni Podcast. What if the answer for our deepest healing begins at zero? Join me today as we explore the center of change. This episode contains adult subject matter, and some listeners may be triggered by this content. Listener discretion is advised. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Jōrni Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. In this episode, we go quantum and dive into what healing and well-being from a zero-point field perspective look like. Curious about how stepping into this mysterious field offers a way to view change and transformation through a different lens? Cristine Hull, PhD, is not just an expert in integrative mental health. She's a transformative force for holistic wellness. With previous careers in substance abuse and school psychology, Cristine holds a master's in psychology and doctorate in natural medicine, along with certifications in EMDR, NLP, and hypnotherapy. She is the developer of zero-point Meridian technique, the frequency school, and quantum wholeness meditation. Cristine's comprehensive approach empowers others to unlock not only their healing potential, but become certified so they can expand the ripple of well-being. Let's meet Dr. Cristine Hull. Hi, Cristine. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because we have something really fascinating coming up, the zero-point Meridian technique. And I don't even want to try and guess at what that will entail. So I will leave that up to your expertise. But thank you for joining me today and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's so good to be here.
It is my absolute pleasure.
Yes, I will definitely let you know more about what that technique is.
Yes. Yeah, I have a few inklings and educated guesses, but let's start with you, Cristine, and your story. Would you like to share a little bit about your journey or your story so far, maybe the pieces that you feel connect up to what you do today, and share with our listeners a bit about what it is that you do today?
Yes, there's many books in that answer. I claimed my role as an author back when I was like in 8th grade. And I'll tell you, that version of me did not have much of a story to tell. But I say that the muses plunged me into my life story when I announced that path. I have traversed lifetimes and timelines and multiple degrees, marriages, and many things in between. My life journey is very complex, multi-layered. I've lived probably the equivalent of several lifetimes just in this one. And I've even got multiple names that I have claimed in my journey for, I think what it is finding myself in all my many layers and my purpose, which part of that is a frequency journey. I talk a lot about razor frequency. And I've gone from, I was a cocaine dealer in my 20s, all the way to a substance abuse counselor in my 30s, to a school psychologist in my 40s. And my 50s became the era of when I was also in private practice during some of that. And then I more or less found the quantum and I realized, oh my gosh, there is a simpler way. So I was really involved in the energy healing movement as it started in our area. So I'm in northern Utah. And I remember the pioneering efforts of that. It's a very Christian predominant area. The people that were finding their spiritual gifts in the, around 2010 era were very quiet about it. We had a lot of quiet gatherings. And so as people were discovering energy medicine, I was fully into my licensure as a mental health clinician, so around 2010 to 2013, I was trying to find this, what I would call the integrative mental health position that I knew was mine, that I hadn't really seen other than like in medicine. There was alternative medicine and integrative medicine. So U of U is a strong college in our area that has some pretty good approaches with medicine. And I have a story of my daughter in that, but we may come back to that one. But I realized that as a mental health practitioner, I couldn't just do it out of the book or out of the box. I was way too multi-layered and complex for that. So I found ways to bring together the energy medicine approach and the best of my master's in psychology. So I actually did pretty deep dive in research and numbers. I love numbers. So I was able to take all of that and do several things with it, which kind of brings us to the now. Some of this I actually turned to fiction just because some of my life is not really believable. I have a series of fiction novels coming out. And what was fun is as I did a rewrite on one of them, I brought in the use of EFT, so emotional freedom technique, as a tool. And I remember as a school psychologist attempting to use, I remained in the school psychology profession until 2011. And I was also in private practice at the same time. But what I found is that I had to leave that setting on the schools because there was no room for anything but the didactic textbook-based solutions. And we want to protect our children, so I understood. But I will tell you, a session I had with a student when I was as a school psychologist, she was so limbic. She was so reactive that she couldn't stay in school if she got triggered. And there was a whole history of her having to be sent home like a couple times a month or maybe even weekly. And I came in that year as a school psychologist and I handled her limbic state with EFT. I remember her sitting across from me and tapping together, and the relief that came over her. Within 15 minutes, she was ready to go back to class. That was epic. There was documentation that had never happened before. So I knew I had something and I had to use it. So I ended up doing it in private practice. So I would attract clients who wanted to use their insurance or wanted to know that they were seeing a real therapist, but they hadn't had success in regular mental health. So they started working with me, and immediately a lot of them were just like, oh my gosh, this is what I've been waiting for. There's real solutions here. But I also held people to a lot of accountability. I was not a talk therapist. We didn't just shoot the breeze week to week. It was, we are going to create change. We're going to measure that change. We're going to be accountable to that. We're going to look at what works and we're going to quickly adjust as needed. But I also gave them things to take home with them because I was not going to be leaned on as the once a week, 1 hour a week solution. It was when someone's taking on change, it's daily. It has to be. Love that about this technique is that people can take it home with them and use it. And what else in therapy, really? I mean, there's a few tools. I've learned quite a bit about DBT, so dialectical behavioral therapy. There are some tools with that. This is the one that worked for me and my clients really well. So by about 2014, I had honed it and redesigned it. So I actually was trained in EFT in 2003. So I'd been using it a decade. And I really had a mastery with it that took it to even a level of like, it wasn't even that anymore. Okay. So I brought in several different things, made some revisions with it. And then I enrolled in Quantum University in 2015. And that was a game changer. So what was going on with me in that little phase of stating, this is my new role. I'm going to bring something to people that hasn't really been done before in the form of integrative mental health. And what that is, let's clarify what that is. It is bringing Eastern solutions and Western solutions together. What I also found is that I began working with a Buddhist monk. I went straight to the source. I wasn't just taking a watered down mindfulness class online, digital. I was working with a bona fide former Buddhist monk to learn mindfulness. And I was also very deep in a Kundalini practice, which is very Eastern in nature. So I was studying the power of Kriyas and There's a book out there called Meditation is Medicine, where a doctor is like, there's something that works here, and making sense of it scientifically. I was bringing some of that. I had a 7-week course where we addressed each chakra, and we had a Kundalini portion that went with it. And it was transformational. It also parallels frequency levels. All these things started to come to me in a beautiful way. And then I discovered there's an actual university that's designed to create this integrative model. Most of the people who were enrolled in it were doctors, but I was one of those few mental health practitioners that was just looking at how can we incorporate it all together. So that was an amazing part of my journey. While I was enrolled with Quantum University, I also had my own health crisis. And actually, it was right before I enrolled. So it was right before I enrolled. I had a health crisis that kind of took me literally to my knees. It actually took me to the floor for, I would say, probably in a coma for 3 hours. I was in the zero. So the zero is where I want to go next. And that is what makes all of this kind of unique. And it brings the science to it, really, where the healing comes from. Do you have any background in the quantum sciences?
I don't have a background in the quantum sciences, but I have dipped my toes in it, let's put it that way, and started reading, because I feel like this is an up and coming topic that is being discussed more and more. And also, I feel like we're about to take a move with this from it being very theoretical to also being a lot more applicable and usable in this world. So yeah, I would love to hear more about that and share this with our listeners as to where we're going with this and what the quantum is and what you found.
Okay, so let me do a few parallels to make it kind of more practical. In the study of Buddhism, there is, I guess, a secular and a more spiritual. So I kind of kept it with the secular. They're doing more science-based and calling it mindfulness in the West and bringing it into things like mindfulness-based stress reduction and things that are actually named and that can be researched. So that has value. The correlation between the quantum and Buddhism is really interesting. Actually, you see it in a couple of places. One is in transcendental meditation. The founder, the originator of transcendental meditation, which is abbreviated TM, and there's an institute in the US that has done extensive research on the power of meditation. The originator is the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, and he was a guru to the Beatles. He came over to the West and began this, ended up in the US where he started the TM movement. And one of the teachers of TM, I actually understand there are more billionaires than TM teachers. The extensiveness of the TM training, it's like you go on a 6-month mission. Like it completely takes your life to stay. I think it's in monastery type setting, and maybe it's changed a little bit in the last couple of years, but I was trained in TM in 2020, right as we came out of quarantine. And I'm grateful I had the experience. It's a beautiful practice. And it requires 20 minutes of meditation twice a day as the practice. So that's realistic in some lives, but it just wasn't something that I could fully embrace for very long. I love it. I could return to it, but the trick is to find a lifestyle. That's where, different techniques or approaches may be more realistic for people. Another one's Vipassana. So Vipassana is a 10-day meditation retreat of silence. And that one I couldn't even imagine. I taught a class on 11/11/11 where I went on record saying, I hope I don't have to go to prison to learn how to meditate. Because it was based on a movie that came out called Doing Time, Doing Vipassana. And the Vipassana model was very effective in prisons. I'm like, if I was in prison, I would totally do it. Totally do it, So some of these Eastern practices haven't completely immersed the West because our lifestyles are a little detached from that reality. I discovered something called quantum entrainment, and it was developed by a doctor I think in psychology or some other health sciences. And his name is Frank Kinslow. And Dr. Kinslow has put out a book called The Secret of Instant Healing. And he talks about zero in a way that was really important for me to understand. I highly recommend the book, The Secret of Instant Healing. I have it in Audible and my audio and paperback because he walks you through the quantum. What he does is on one of his pages, he's got a chair on the top of the page, then he's got a molecule below it, then he's got an atom, and then he has subatomic particles and a subatomic wave. I want people to kind of just sit with that, seeing, and the same thing was presented actually by a teacher of TM. He explained the same kind of concept. It goes from large, dense down to finer, molecular, atomic, subatomic matter. The process of meditation, it's interesting because that is really the goal. The TM teacher talks about choppy thought. And choppy thought is when you're in your headspace with all of the heaviness of the world. And when you find your freedom from that, you drop down into a quiet that becomes more finer, lighter, freer. And some people can't even comprehend that. The things that I had to do because my mind was not ready immediately is yoga. Yoga's a powerful tool. And if you can be fully present in your yoga practice, you're starting to move out of choppy thought and moving the body as a conduit, basically, for the present moment can be very effective. Yoga was very helpful. He did that, like I said, Kundalini, but also other yoga practices. Hatha yoga is one of my favorites for several years. I'm still doing that. That is still a key part of my routines. The other thing was guided imagery. Most people, when they talk about meditation, I found more than half of Americans who are meditating are actually doing guided imagery. They're not really meditating. I define meditation as stillness and silence. If it's a yoga type meditation, you're moving. If it's a guided imagery type, you're still, but you're not silent. To me, true meditation is both stillness and silence. Otherwise, do the other things because they're also very effective. But know that meditation looks a little different. The guided imagery can be very effective if you have a great guide and you're able to really connect and focus in on this experience in the here and now, visually use bringing your senses into it and having this whole dynamic of shifting going on internally. It's beautiful. Okay. So that's part of this zero. I went deeper into the zero when I found quantum entrainment, which is total stillness and silence with intention to heal. And I think that's what makes it even more unique because in meditation, the intention is usually just Zen, empty bowl. But intention of healing was very interesting to me. And I love the power of group meditation. So I ended up creating something called quantum wholeness meditation. And I think I actually created that. Well, it definitely was named before 0 Point Meridian. But I like to talk about both because what I found is that for people to get to stillness and silence, there's a lot of emotional energy a lot of times that's in the way. To get to quantum wholeness meditation, often we use 0 Point Meridian to clear the path to the silence. Are you a meditator? What is your experience with that?
I do. And as you, I had a lot of trouble with that to start. And I actually also tried walking meditations and all sorts of really active. Yeah, I found that helpful because I have, I guess, the choppy thoughts quite frequently. So, and the emotional bits that come up as well that are in the way. So, as you said, I feel like that's a bit of a journey for some of us to come to meditation through that.
Yeah, it is. It is a journey. Being really proactive and very routine oriented with meditation, that will elevate someone's frequency faster than anything else I've seen. On that frequency journey, I actually have something called a frequency school. And we talk about the frequency model with a 100 frequency being misery, whether that's physical health or emotional well-being or a really dysfunctional relationship or homelessness or poverty. Yeah. Okay. 200 is where you're just kind of treading water. So you're kind of on that raft on the ocean. You're like, all right, I'm alive. I can't live here very long, but I'm alive. And the raft is holding me up. So that could be medications holding you up or being dependent on a financial system that takes care of you. but it's not a really great way to live. 300 is kind of the hero zone. And what's interesting about the world of therapy is you have a lot of 300 frequency models out there of therapy or practices or just solutions that are like behavioral, say. You kind of have to keep doing it over and over and over and depend on something outside of you to support you. At 400, you start to find the true solutions. It's a place of total personal responsibility, and you start to claim your power. But it's a roller coaster because it's as you claim your power, as you find real solutions that work for you and you can be fully responsible to engage in, it doesn't work all the time. You got to stick with it or move around and navigate in a new way. So it's like you're on a ship and you've got something, but there's waves and there's stuff and it's a lot of work. It's a real growing experience at a 400. This is where I would kind of put 0 point meridian. 500 is where you find the calmer seas. And that's the way I think everybody is like, if we can just get to 500, a 500 financially is like, you're not having to worry about the money coming in. It's not a constant, are we going to be okay month to month? It's like stable income that's maybe even passive or residual, which is amazing, right? The 500 in mental health is like, you're good. Like you've got it dialed in. And you've got your system, and there might be a fluctuation here and there, but you're good. It's amazing. Health, it's like, this is where the quantum sciences come in. Because in quantum university, one of the first things we were taught is entropy is a universal condition. Things will deteriorate. Things will get worse. Okay. You age over time. Money runs out. If you get a lump sum, it's going to go away over time. That's entropy. And that's very much the 100 to 300 world. But negentropy or syntropy, however you want to call it, is where you reverse even these physical laws. That's where it gets quantum, because you actually you gain this mastery or this potential over the physical dimensions. And that's where you start getting to 600, because then you can start to create the miraculous and see shifting happen that isn't logical, that isn't typical. I love working in that world, and seeing people get there typically takes a practice like meditation. But to get to meditation, you might need 0 point meridian. So that's why I like to lay it out, because it's like ZPM at a 400 frequency, you're going to be doing over and over and over, or EFT anyway. EFT, I would say, is a good 400 frequency. And I did years of it trying to get myself well and the world around me balanced and less reactive and all that. And I taught it to people. But when I added the quantum side of it, and some of this, like I said, comes from the quantum entrainment approach, the intention and the power of zero. What Dr. Kinslow talks about is reaching a place of zero that feels like nothing, but that has the power of that 600 and higher to create a quantum shift. And the trick is to access it and stay with it and trust it and let ego go. And he talks a lot about that in his book, Let the Ego Go, because the ego is going to freak out over the 600. It's going to create all kinds of resistance. Oh, I don't have time to meditate anymore. Oh, we better not do that because there's something out there that we don't understand. And that's what you're battling in the choppy, is the ego mind. So the ego mind at its worst, I don't know, at its worst, we don't even want to look at, but at its best even, is attempting to use fear to keep you safe. We'll say that's at its best. Or smallness to keep you safe. Or some sort of defense mechanism to protect you. Those are emotions. Those are actually low frequency emotions. If you clear those, you're safer than if you lean on the ego. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, because the emotions, as you said, they also create frequencies within us, right? So they will disrupt.
And they'll attract more that lines up with that. Like
exactly.
You put that out in the universe and it's like, oh, see, no wonder you should be afraid, because look at what happened to them. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Clear those out and open up that path. And
okay, so the basics of this zero concept come from breathing. So I was working with a physical therapist, And I knew that there was more to releasing trauma. I used some EFT with a client, and I used my version of it, which I called it the complete EFT method for a while, because it was like, it really all fit together really well. But that didn't work. And this was about 2014. I invited a physical therapist friend of mine. His name is Sherrick Peck, and he developed a vibrational system of healing the body as well as trauma. He's got some tools that reverse disease, which is awesome. And he does use actual vibration to do it. Resimax is the background on, or the name of his product. He taught this to me, and I was like, this is so cool. And he showed me how it could release trauma in minutes. So I had him come into my office, and he used an exercise ball to get all the air out of my client's abdominal area. She laid over this exercise ball while she was exhaling. And I remember the zero she reached in that. We were working through this trauma. She did this exhale. She used her whole physical being to release every molecule of air, basically. And when she reached this certain point, I remember feeling the zero in the room. It was like the vacuum. And I started to study this. I actually used Wikipedia to like, what's that? And looking at the laws of nature, I learned that the electromagnetic field, for example, has a 0-point limit and an infinite range. So that's quantum. 0-point limit, infinite range. In the electromagnetic field, what would be a zero limit? Electromagnetic field is like our life force energy, our chi, the meridians. When we're tapping on meridians, we're tapping on this electromagnetic field pathways. Any guesses on what a zero electromagnetic field looks like? It's a cadaver. It's a cadaver. If you look at our Western medicine basis, like my daughter actually was studying to be in some medical field, and she had to go into a room of cadavers to study. It was either the nervous system or something like that she was going to study. They basically study the body without any life force energy there. So they're basing medicine on just the physical, just that dimension. They're not looking at the energetic. Eastern medicine is looking at the energetic without carving open the body. It's interesting how that works. The interesting thing about that is I felt something that was a zero. So this is how it all connects, is that the zero of the electromagnetic field is death, or is a cadaver. Okay. What is an infinite range with the electromagnetic field? Any guesses? Those who are Christians would say that is a Christ consciousness. Okay, an infinite atonement. In the idea of the book that I was sharing, The Secret of Instant Healing, Frank Kinslow calls it pure awareness. But what we're basically saying is that adjacent to the nothing, and this is in the quantum model, okay, so we get down to particles and waves, and then we get to what's called the 0-point field. The 0-point field is the nothing. It's in science, in physics, the absence of, the vacuum. But there's something beyond that. So beyond the 0-point field is what they call the unified field in science, in quantum sciences. The unified field in religious terms is the light of Christ. The unified field in Frank Kinslow's terms is pure awareness. But whatever that is where all is. So we go right from nothing to all. And that circles back to Buddhism, which teaches the same principle. An empty bowl seems to be nothingness, but it has a potential for anything. You can put anything in that bowl. Thought, food. Okay. So those principles are so true. It's so powerful. Once you can truly clear your mind, and A Course in Miracles is another, we study that. I have a group that studies A Course in Miracles, and we add meditation to that. It's called 1,000,000 at 1. And the idea is that when you get enough people together, and I don't think we have to have 1,000,000, I think we have a handful and we do a lot. When you have a group of people that gets together with intention, there are some amazing results that happen. And one of the most powerful things I've read in this is there's a section called the process of psychotherapy. It talks about psychotherapy as a healing, okay? Purpose, process, and practice. And it says basically that A wholly egoless therapist can heal the world. Basically what it says. If you take one individual whose role is healing, vacuum out all ego, they then become a receptacle for pure consciousness. They can walk into a room and you can feel a shift. I've experienced this with people who've had near-death experiences. And I started to be more aware of it after I had my own zero experience. After I encountered that nothingness myself, I started to access more of this power and potential and use it. And sometimes I scare myself away and I go backwards because we do that. And then I come back and I learn a different type of meditation or a different way to keep myself accountable. It's a journey, but a journey at that higher frequency is definitely one worth pursuing. I'll just say that.
Yeah, absolutely. And is there a specific starting point for maybe some of our listeners who may have never tried meditation before, or it might not be something like yourself? Maybe they came at it and said, "Oh, I've ever had a really hard time with that." Any advice on where they could start with this to start making their way?
So I actually have a tool. It's a frequency assessment, and it's on my website at CristineHull.com, and find out where you're at. Because I use the reference of a rock climber, and a rock climber's highest frequency is their top hand. And I talk about 5 life areas. Spiritually, I have a client right now whose top hand is spiritual, and that's great. But then there's also financial, relationships, mental health, and physical health. Her bottom leg is physical health. Until she gets her body and her spirituality connected, best thing she could do is yoga. So it just totally depends on an individual's frequency and where those frequency levels are dissociated, if you want to call it that, or integrated. And that's one of the biggest challenges I see with people is they talk about dissociation in clinical terms, and it's basically a lack of integration. Integration is one of the biggest solutions I've ever seen, whether it's brain integration or spirit body integration, which would be like a yoga practice. There's some great brain integration tools that one of them is this quantum wholeness meditation. We actually incorporate an integration aspect to that. There's solutions, but it's good to at least know where you're at, where your starting point is. And then as you advance, or are you ready to advance? It really is, think about a rock climber. Can you grow more spiritually if your legs are not moving, right? That top arm can't get any further than it is until the legs come up. And I think that's one thing that I'll see is people want to develop their strengths because that's easy. That's what they know. And then if you lean on someone or create a kind of an unhealthy dynamic because you don't want to deal with your weaknesses, then you'll be stuck and you'll blame the other person.
Thank you for sharing that. I find this is absolutely fascinating. And I'd like to ask you one more thing, and that is this transformation, because it sounds that, as you said, living almost multiple lifetimes in this life, there were transformations that were happening.
And that's one of the things I had to integrate is all these aspects of myself.
And how do these transformations show up in people's lives? When you work with clients on these different aspects, what do you see changes in their lives as they're moving through the frequencies? What do you experience? What do you observe?
What I observe, here's the 2 biggest things I think are: 1, discomfort has purpose. Whether that discomfort is to get you out of your comfort zone or it's part of your growing, you can be more proactive about your discomfort. You can say, I'm going to choose to go marathoning because I know that is what would lift my bottom leg, even though I don't want to do it. But I'd rather have that than like Parkinson's or some other condition that because I'm not accessing my physical choices, it'll cost me in some other way. And then total personal responsibility is huge. When someone takes full responsibility, I've developed some techniques that work with couples and families. And that is the first thing. I can't go much further with someone if they don't take personal responsibility. If they see the problem is outside themselves, we're at a loss. We can't move. So total responsibility. And half of it is the ego. If your ego is being triggered by someone or something in your life, no, that's your ego, not that. It's an opportunity for personal growth.
Yeah, absolutely. And what kind of changes do you see? How their lives change as we move through these frequencies?
I love measuring that. Okay. I love measuring that. I've actually developed quite a few tools with really strong quantitative measurements. I can show somebody, look at, here's what's different. One of my favorites, it's a combination of a satisfaction with life scale that's been standardized to some extent, the CAMS, which is a affective mindfulness scale, cognitive affective mindfulness scale. And the third is Kristen Neff's scale for self-compassion. One of the most prevalent things that changes is the level of self-compassion someone has. The combination of total and radical personal responsibility accompanied by self-compassion creates a life that you want to be in, a body and mind you want to be in. And I love measuring that and showing it to people when they see, gosh, the practice of meditation or using 0 point Meridian when I'm hijacked is creating a condition in me that is better to live within. And yeah, you get out of your own battle. So I have a hashtag end your war. And hashtag end your war is basically don't be at war with anybody out there. It's your own. The source of that war is your ego mind. And there is a way out. And that goes back to Buddhism too. That's really what Buddhism is about, is there is suffering. Most of the time, suffering is because of our own stuff, our own ego mind. We're clinging. There is a way to end suffering, and there's a path to do that. And self-compassion, definitely part of that.
The book that you mentioned before, which was not your book, it also touches on healing. Is this something that people also use in their lives for affecting physical changes?
Yes, I'd actually like to mention my book. I do have a book out called Being at Zero. And Being at Zero is a really fun mix of a memoir and an anthology. So the anthology has chapters in there from some of the people that have been part of meditation groups and people that have been on my Arise summits. One of them is Vinnie Tolman, who had a near-death experience that he was actually revived out of a body bag. He had to be unzipped. Yeah, isn't that wild? So I was one of the first to interview him publicly and get his story. And that's as well as a memoir. And the memoir is how I use these tools to get through a pretty hefty divorce consciously and come through and find basically the life I'd been seeking. And a lot of it was just continuing the practice and having the support of a meditation group and going through hard things with the right tools and the right people. It's fun. It's a deep personal story, along with some really good mix of how to think differently, how to look at your life compass, that are just great tools. Being at zero. And it talks a little bit about the nature of zero.
And what do you offer, Christine, as far as program services? If our listeners have absolutely had their minds blown now and they're very curious about what we've been talking about, how can they connect with you and how can they work with you in this quantum playground?
That is a good question. So I do train practitioners. So I actually developed a certification model. It's internationally accredited. That's one of the things. I don't have a training right away, but I definitely encourage people to start exploring to see if that might be a good fit for them. So ChristineHull.com has a few different options with that. I do also have our meditation group. You see the meditation community and join there. That's one of the best ways. It's pretty inexpensive. It's about the price of a copay to be part of really 3 sessions a week and have a really rich experience of meditation and community. And then there's practitioners, there's 0 Point Meridian practitioners out there, and you can find some of them on zpmpro.com. There's a few options. And I think just getting a feel for where you're at, that frequency assessment, I'll make sure that's available on ChristineHull.com as well. And just start exploring where you're at and looking at, there's some feedback that comes with your scores for suggestions.
Wonderful. And we will be linking to all of Cristine's offerings in the show notes as well. So be sure to check there on how you can find the frequency assessment, join the meditation group if you like, or if you feel called, if this is something that really has piqued your interest and you feel this part of your life path, and you can become a practitioner down the road as well and explore that option, which I think that's always fascinating, not just for our own path and our own healing, and then also bringing that out into the world. So a lot of different options for you. Cristine, thank you for bringing this wisdom to our show today. And I just want to thank you for being here. I had such an amazing time with you, and I learned so many new things that I'm going to go look up now and explore. So thank you so much for that and for sharing that with our listeners. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much. You were great to give me the space to roll a lot out in a really short time. Thank you so much. And I can sense that your listeners are going to be able to take that in and digest a lot of it. So I'm grateful to have the opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, a nice bit that they can start with, where they can start exploring, dipping their toes in and taking it from there into whatever direction and path it takes them on. Thank you so much for sharing that, and take really good care of yourself, Cristine.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Jōrni Podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Jōrni on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejorni.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.